On this Halloween, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to start this hour with the unseasonably warm weather in the Northeast, where it feels more like late August than late October. The higher than normal temperatures are expected to bring out a record number of revelers this Halloween, like in Salem, Massachusetts, which bills itself as having the largest celebration of the holiday in the world.
Yeah, there's a downside to this warm weather. It's causing several major brush fires across that area, fires that are putting both locals and tourists on edge.
He was like, hey, just a heads up, Salem's on fire. And I'm like, wait, what?
Worries every night. You don't know if it's going to reach your house or not.
Forecasters are calling for a possible cool down this weekend. It could be short-lived. More high temperatures are expected next week. In just a moment, we're going to check in with NBC News meteorologist Angie Lastman, who's standing by with your Halloween forecast. But first, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch. He's in Salem with the very latest.
Hey guys, good morning. If Christmas has the North Pole, Halloween has Salem, Massachusetts. This is the home of the infamous witch trials from the 17th century. It might be jogging your memory from history class. And this year, it is literally and figuratively a hot Halloween destination. Because while we're in the 50s, it's a little chilly right now. We've got that crisp New England air. It's going to climb into the upper 70s. That's what we're looking at in the forecast. And this is just one of numerous communities across stretches of the country that are looking at a hot Halloween. Some positives that go with that, right? That means you don't need to layer up under the costumes. I know when I was a kid, I was always fighting my mom about having to put a sweatshirt or a winter coat on under the costume. Kids, a lot of you are probably not going to have to do that this year, but listen to your parents. I'm not the final arbiter on that. Dozens of cities nationwide expecting above average temperatures, with places like Hartford and Pittsburgh poised to smash records today with summer-like heat. In New York City, organizers of the annual Village Halloween Parade, the nation's largest, say the unusual warmth could draw even bigger crowds. And here in Salem, Massachusetts, officials are expecting potentially to break visitor records this year. But this community is also dealing with two brush fires that have been burning and impacting air quality. And I can tell you that we have been smelling some smoke in the air this morning. It's not a strong scent, but it's definitely out there. Hopefully it will not get in the way of Halloween festivities here. I've got a little bit of a solution to deal with that heat and making sure the candy does not get damaged. We'll talk about that, guys, coming up at 8. We'll see you in a bit.
All right, Jesse Kirsch listening to his mom and layering up.
There you go. For more on this hair-raising Halloween heat, let's take a look at your Morning News Now weather.
Angie Lastman is here with the forecast. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. I think that's a shared experience of growing up in a place where it's normally chilly on Halloween. Yes, the layers are needed for the most part. And we will see a couple of spots across the country that, yes, it will be chilly and fairly seasonable. But that's not part of the northeastern part of the country's plan here as we go through at least the next 2 days. We've got, as Jesse mentioned, a whole lot of folks that are expected to hit the upper 70s, some that are expected to head to the 80s, like Philadelphia. Not quite a record, but sure is going to be close there. We've got Hartford set to tie the record, Pittsburgh upper 70s, Scranton upper 70s. I mean, these temperatures, again, running way warm for this time of year. And that goes for tomorrow, too. Notice the cold front that inches a little closer. It'll bring us some relief from the heat on the backside of it, but still closer to the coast and interior portions of New England will be running warm. Temperatures remain into the upper 70s, stretching from Annapolis to Philadelphia and up into parts of New York. Now, on the backside of that front, though, eventually it'll work offshore and we'll be left with some cooler, more comfortable and kind of typical conditions that we see for this time of year. That is short-lived because we see this kind of roller coaster continue. But let's break it down for you when it comes to the weekend. Low 60s to upper 50s through the weekend and into early next week for New York City. But notice Washington, D.C. We hit the mid-60s on Saturday. We're back to the 70s by Monday. And even back towards Chicago, low 60s for Saturday and Sunday. And then we inch up close to 70 by the time Monday rolls around. Indianapolis expected to be in the mid-70s by the time we get into our next work week. So more of that warmth is going to be there. Now, good news for folks that don't want the extra layers, like, say, on the East Coast. We've got Bat Cave, North Carolina, guys, 66 degrees. That's not a bad temperature for trick-or-treating. We see Sleepy Hollow into the mid-70s. Where we're we're going to have some spooky kind of conditions. The Great Lakes stretching down to Texas, Scurry, Texas, 74 degrees, but rain is in the forecast. Notice Pumpkin Bend. Who knew that existed? Pumpkin Bend, Arkansas, upper 60s, but rain again. We'll need those umbrellas. Could hamper some kids when they're out trick-or-treating. My personal favorite on this map, Mummy Pass, Colorado. It's going to be fairly cold there, though, 21 degrees. We'll see clear skies overhead, mid-50s expected for Skull Valley, Arizona, where we will see some kind of snowy and chilly conditions. Mount Mystery, Washington. I always learn so much from these maps.
I know. It's so
these
fun
cities that are so festive. But yes, there is some rain, unfortunately, in the forecast. Is that your favorite?
It is a stretch, but we appreciate the creativity.
Listen,
How you say it, scurry.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thank you, Angie. Appreciate
a little bit.
We are down to the final 5 days of the campaign. Both candidates are going all out to win over voters in battleground states. Last night, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump held competing rallies in the swing state of Wisconsin.
Yeah, in Madison, the vice president told a crowd of students that this was the most consequential election of our time and called on supporters to help her forge a new path forward. As for Mr. Trump, he is about 160 miles away in Green Bay. The former president continued to lean heavily on that comment by President Biden in which he seemed to call Trump supporters garbage. That was in response to a controversial joke using that language about Puerto Rico by comedian Tony Hinchcliffe at a Trump rally last weekend. To emphasize Biden's comment, this is what you're seeing on your screen right here. Mr. Trump appeared in an orange vest and climbed into a garbage truck, later bringing up those comments at his rally.
Kamala and Joe call all of us, and them, even them, garbage. I call you the heart and soul of America. You are the heart and soul. You built our country.
We have an opportunity in this election to turn the page on a decade of Donald Trump, trying to keep us divided and afraid of each other. That is who he is, but Madison, that is not who we are.
Joining us now to talk more about all this, NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns, who's covering the Trump campaign, and NBC News White House correspondent Ali Rafa, who's following the vice president. Good morning to both of you. Dasha, let's start with you. Mr. Trump is really, as you saw there, seizing on these garbage comments by President Biden. Tell us a little more about how the former president is using it to try to galvanize his supporters.
Yeah, hey, Joe, good morning. Yeah, let's not forget that this did start with a controversy for the former president. Those comments where a comic at the Madison Square Garden rally called Puerto Rico an island of garbage. The Trump campaign was facing a tough news cycle for about 48 hours. And it was in the middle of that news cycle that President Biden made those comments. And the Trump campaign was, I would say, almost gleeful about it. They see this really as a gift to be able to pivot the headlines away from the Trump controversy. And clearly they are leaning in hard. A Trump campaign advisor told us that they were going to, quote, block out the sun with those Biden comments. And now you saw him yesterday in that orange safety vest in the garbage truck. They are leaning in hard. This is being blasted all over their social media, all over fundraising emails. They are going to try to ride this thing as long as they can, guys.
And Ali, let's bring you in here. How much blowback is the Harris campaign getting from these comments? Are they frustrated? And how's Harris trying to distance herself from it?
Yeah, well, as you heard Dasha mention, this comment immediately drew criticism from Republicans. And this is really the last thing that the Harris campaign thought that they would be dealing with, especially the morning after that historic rally, that speech that she gave on the Ellipse here in Washington. But within hours of the comment being made by the president, we saw the president himself, as well as the White House, try to clarify, saying that the president was talking about that comedian at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally and not Trump supporters, even though we did see Vice President Harris come out and try to distance herself from that comment while still not condemning her boss, the president himself. Listen to what she told reporters when traveling to North Carolina yesterday.
I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for. As president of the United States, I will be a president for all Americans, whether you vote for me or not.
Now, it's still unclear how this, if at all, affects the Harris campaign and their push with just a few days until the election. But again, this is definitely not what they wanted to be talking about, pushing this defense strategy rather than talking about their own messaging and trying to use that comment from that comedian against the Trump campaign with just a few days left, guys.
So, Dasha, there was another moment from Mr. Trump's Wisconsin rally that's making headlines, one that the Harris campaign is already pouncing on, his comments about protecting women. What did he say?
Yeah, look, this comes in the context, Joe, of the gender gap that we've been talking constantly about, and criticism from some within Trump's own party, folks like Nikki Haley coming out saying there is too much of a bro fest going on right now in the Trump campaign, and they are alienating women. Here's what he said last night.
My people told me about 4 weeks ago, I was saying, no, I want to protect the people. I want to protect the women of our country. I want to protect the women. Sir, please don't say that. Why? They said, we think it's very inappropriate for you to say. I said, why? I'm president. I want to protect the women of our country. I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not.
Yeah, and the Trump campaign has really been focused on winning men, young men, men of color, and the Harris campaign reaching out to women with that message of reproductive rights, but both trying to sort of try to narrow that gender gap. Those sorts of comments operatives are saying are not going to help the former president with that. And as you said, the Harris campaign already jumping on it. We're getting those campaign emails from them. And I would not be surprised if those comments ended up in a Harris campaign ad, guys.
And Allie, Harris's campaign heads to Arizona and Nevada later today. Tell us about her schedule and those visits.
Yeah, that's right. Harris heading to those critical Sunbelt states with very heavily Latino populations. And she's going to be appearing in Phoenix, Reno, and Las Vegas in some of these events, appearing with popular Latino artists, for example, Jennifer Lopez. And it's going to be interesting to see how she navigates this messaging, this outreach to these this Latino population, especially in the wake of those comments, guys.
All right, Dasha and Allie, thank you both.
Let's stay with the election. The Trump campaign is making allegations of voter fraud in Pennsylvania, but they've not produced any evidence. NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson takes a look.
Videos like these of long lines in Bucks County amplified by the Trump camp alleging something nefarious.
The Trump-Vance campaign has just filed a huge lawsuit against Bucks County for turning away our voters.
But in reality, Bucks County says they were trying to stick with business hours and miscommunicated that plan to some people waiting to submit mail ballots. Now, after a court order, they'll be open through Friday. Then there's this allegation.
They've already started cheating in Lancaster. They've cheated. We caught them with 2,600 votes. And every vote was written by the same person. I wonder how that happened.
They weren't votes. They were hundreds of fraudulent registration applications. And officials also wonder how it happened, which is why they've rejected those applications submitted by paid canvassers and are investigating. It's exactly how the system is supposed to work. Safeguards kicking in to prevent any cheating, not accelerate it.
When you have cases like this, it should encourage people to have more faith in the system, not less.
It comes as former President Trump and his team are ramping up attacks on the election, despite no evidence of widespread fraud, framing processes that seem standard as suspicious and potentially planting the seed now to dispute the results later.
There is certainly a strategy right now to cast doubt on the results of the election before the votes have been cast.
It's an echo of the former president's election fraud lies in 2016 and in 2020 when his allies lost dozens of court challenges. The Pennsylvania governor today says the state will again have a free and fair, safe and secure election. Back to you.
All right, Hallie, thank you so much.
Now, when voters across the country do head to the polls on Tuesday, they're not just voting for the next president of the United States. Voters will also decide on nearly 150 ballot measures that are on ballots in 41 states. These are policy proposals that can amend a state's constitution or create new laws.
We've heard a lot about abortion being on the ballot, right? Well, it is in 10 states, but there are other policy proposals that cover everything from how states handle marijuana regulations to voting procedures, economic issues, even immigration laws.
NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett joins us now with more on the ones to watch. Maura, good to have you with us. Let's go over some of the really important issues that people should know about before they cast their votes next week. These are the ones you should kind of prepare for, do some research before you go. Where are we seeing ballot measures that could really impact the way people can actually vote in future elections?
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. Yeah, there's 39 ballot measures in various states across the country, including Idaho, Iowa, Kentucky, Missouri, that all are looking to tighten voter restrictions. Basically, in these states, they're saying the policy is asking for American citizens being the only people that are allowed to vote. Obviously, in these states and in federal elections, that is the law as it stands, but they're really looking to tighten those restrictions around the narrative of undocumented immigrants voting. Obviously, this happens very, very rarely in very rare cases. And so election experts are wary of these measures in these Republican-held states because it allows Republicans to push that narrative that illegal voting is happening when it's not. And then when it comes to other proposed amendments, there are some questions around requiring voter ID in other states, along with questions on open primaries or ranked choice voting. So none of these would affect this election, but could impact your future elections in your state.
Maura, where are we seeing ballot measures that would amend states' constitutions when it comes to some of these social and economic issues, like reproductive rights that we've discussed a lot, and like minimum wage?
Yeah, these are the issues that ultimately drive people to the ballot box, right? They want to vote for the person they want for president or their leadership, but these are the policy issues that people say they really care about. And so advocates say, like Joe mentioned, make sure you do your research and then make sure you're voting all the way down the ballot. In terms of those issues specifically around abortion, you mentioned it's in 10 states. They're looking to basically impact the access to reproductive rights that we've been talking about for the last 2 years. This includes the battleground states of Arizona and Nevada, as well as the Senate battlegrounds in Montana and Florida. And then interestingly, this year in 3 states, Colorado, California, and Hawaii, related to what we saw happen with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, these 3 states are putting a same-sex marriage measure on their ballot, looking to repeal that language from the state constitution because they saw what happened when Roe was overturned, saw those trigger laws take effect in other states, and they're trying to avoid that in the off chance if Obergefell was ever overturned, the precedent that established same-sex marriage. That's something that Supreme Court justices have suggested they want to revisit. Now, in terms of other important issues on immigration, Arizona is the only state that has this on the ballot, but it's a really important policy one because basically the policy that's been proposed would increase the use of a federal database to check employment eligibility and also give state and local law enforcement agencies the ability to detain and deport any border crossings, despite the fact that it's been established that federal law enforcement have that responsibility right now. Now, finally, you also mentioned marijuana legalization. I think it's important to note that 4 more states, Florida, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota, will decide whether to join the other nearly half of the states in the country that already have legalized medical and recreational marijuana. And so those are just a handful of all of the ballot measures that people will be looking at on their ballot next week.
Great job running them all down. So I have to admit, I didn't know much about ballot proposals till I moved to the West Coast. And they're very much a way of life out there. But it begs the question, how do these proposals end up on ballots in the first place?
It can kind of vary state by state, and so that's something that you'll have to check out depending on the state that you live in. But one option is that lawmakers can propose a ballot measure. They discuss it on the House floor, and then they vote on it in the state legislature. And so that's kind of an easy way to get it on the ballot. The other way is that citizens, every average day people, can propose a ballot measure. That then requires you to get a certain amount of signatures from petitions of people, in your neighborhood if they want to also put it on the ballot. And then that goes to a vote as well. But that's something that an easy way for people to get involved in civic engagement or getting to build a relationship with your lawmakers so that they can propose the ballot issues that you're looking for.
All right, Maura, thank you so much.
Yeah, great information. Thanks, Maura. Well, we covered TikTok a lot on this show, right? And we've been talking a lot about the role the platform is playing in this year's election. For example, how it's educating young voters on both sides of the political spectrum about each candidate. There's a new trend, though, racking up views. Some young voters are posting videos joking about canceling out a partner or family member's vote by voting for the opposite candidate. It's one way they're trying to deal with what is otherwise a very tight and contentious presidential race. NBC News youth and internet culture reporter Callan Rosenblatt joins us with more on this. Callan, good morning. So TikTok has been this big source of political content for young voters in this election. And again, on both sides of the aisle, you can find so much political content on this app. But we do want to point out, like, no vote actually cancels out another vote technically. So how did this get started, and what are these videos saying?
Yeah, Savannah, good morning. Canceling out another person's vote, not necessarily a new concept. I think this has been a running joke for many elections. But as more young people, are now eligible to vote, I think we're seeing this sort of humor explode on the app, mostly because of how contentious and how much tension there is around this race. It's kind of been a way to sort of puncture that tension with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor. Now, as you can see, some people are saying, I'm canceling out my dad's vote. I'm canceling out, my brother's vote. And some people are even joking, well, I don't have anyone to cancel out in my life, so I'm canceling out someone's dad somewhere. So really, it's mostly, I think, about, injecting a little bit of humor into the election. And as you said, no vote cancels out another. I mean, that's the whole point of elections, right, is whoever gets the most votes cancels out the other candidate. So it's really, to me, a way for these young people and people of all ages who use TikTok to inject a little bit of humor and a little bit of levity into a moment where there is a lot of tension around this race.
There is a lot of tension, Callan, and we've been doing these NBC News Stay Tuned Gen Z polls. I just am so happy that we did this because I felt like they were really revealing. Take a look right now on your screen. This is a pretty big stat out of it. 6 out of 10 Gen Z voters who said they plan to vote for Harris said that if a friend planned to vote for Trump, it would strain their friendship. This is so interesting to me because there was also a poll that came out yesterday from Axios that also said that Gen Z is the generation that lies the most about who they're voting for. That kind of feels related, right? Like, I'm not going to tell my friend I'm voting for Trump, or I'm not going to tell my friend I'm voting for Harris. Who are we seeing more differences between? Is it kids and their parents? I know a lot of times this poll revealed that there's the same political views within a house, or at least with one parent. Or is this tension with friends and romantic partners? What are you seeing online?
Yeah, everything I've seen is anecdotal, so it's not hard data. But a lot of what I've seen is mostly young women, or, women who are millennials, Gen Z, who are sort of saying, I'm voting differently than a partner or a father. And in some cases, the young women that I spoke with said they didn't want to tell me, who they were voting for, because they didn't even want to reveal it to me. So I think we're seeing this trend sort of mostly impact young women and their partners or their fathers. That seems to be the key demographic here. But again, that's anecdotal evidence. It's hard to know exactly who is planning to, quote unquote, cancel someone else's vote.
Well, and that's interesting because it sounds like what you just said with young women and fathers, depending on their relationship partners, it seems like it gets at that gender gap, which is also, we're heavily seeing that come out in pretty much every poll across the board. Callan, I also know that these videos canceling, this whole concept, canceling out a vote, there's also this opposite effect, which gets at what we were just talking about. And I mentioned in this poll, we saw how many young people have the same political views as their parents, but where people are posting about how they're grateful that, within their home, they had the same political views, or with their partner or with their friend. What are you kind of like seeing more of? Like, did you notice if one of these trends is getting more posts than the other? What the sentiment mostly is between canceling out or this gratitude about having the same views?
Well, what was interesting is before early voting started, I saw a lot of content that said, I'm canceling out so-and-so's vote. As early voting has begun, I'm now seeing a huge influx of content that shows partners saying that, I'm so grateful that my partner voted the same way that I did, or saying something to the effect of like, see, we can have a household with the same political beliefs, or, so-and-so, like, for example, I have a husband who's voting for Harris, and there's men who are, still out there voting for women's rights and who consider themselves feminists. So we are seeing, actually, now that early voting has started, an influx of people sort of celebrating the fact that their partners are voting for the same person that they are. But prior to early voting, it was a lot about, this duality of like canceling out one another's vote. And now there's this sort of celebration, as I mentioned, with, some of these partners that, they're voting for the same candidate, which is an interesting shift. over time.
Absolutely. Callan, also, just so you know, there's a gorgeous sunrise going on over your shoulder. Go check it out. Thank you very much. Really interesting stuff. TikTok's so important in this election. We'll keep talking about it. We know you'll keep your eyes on it through next week for us. Thank you. Well, it's Halloween all over America, right? But the real House of Horrors was in the Bronx last night for the New York Yankees. And the Los Angeles Dodgers, on the other hand, are waking up champions this morning. Get ready for a lot of fives here, okay? The LA Dodgers won the World Series in Game 5 at Yankee Stadium Wednesday night, overcoming a 5-run deficit in an error-filled 5th inning by the Yankees. I was actually watching, and the 5th inning was wild, to seal the comeback, going on to win the game 7-6. With that, the Dodgers claim their 8th title in franchise history, their first since the COVID-19 shortened 2020 season, and their first in a full season since 1988. They also became the first team to use more than 7 pitchers to pull off a championship clinching win. Sorry, New York. Congratulations, LA.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.